Good afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to talk about the lungs. So last week we talked about the liver, and this, like I said, will be a kind of an ongoing series where I talk more about the organ systems in relation to the seasons, what it means for us as everyday Americans, so that you guys can hopefully get some medicine from these ideas, so it's not just esoteric drivel. So piggybacking what I said last week, the organs digest thought and emotion. That's a big concept to understand. So outside of the things we take in, the alcohol we drink, the foods we consume, or the liquids that we put in, the organs are also digesting thought and emotion. And if you can understand that, then it kind of opens up the playing field in terms of how we can take care of our lungs at this time of year. So the first thing we want to look at, all right, is the positive and negative emotional spectrum that the lungs will process. On the negative side, the lungs are going to process grief, sadness, and sorrow. On the positive side, they process nostalgia. And what this means really in real time is that we have a healthy relationship to our past. We're not trying to live in the past. We're not trying to be something that we're not. You guys all know, most of you that know me, I went to Chico State, and at 38 right now, as I'm pushing 40, and if I were to be trying to drive to Chico every weekend to go to the rugby parties that I used to partake in and do keg stands and live that life, most of you would probably say, great, it's probably time to retire that and move on and don't be that guy. So that would be a non-healthy relationship to the past. So if we can look back on the things that we've done and say, you know what, that was a good time in my life, and it changed me in a number of ways, and I've taken the lessons from that and moved on and integrated them, this is all relating to lung function. So that's one thing we need to consider. The next thing we need to look at is this relationship to our animal instincts. So I had mentioned in last week's video that the liver houses what they call the ethereal soul. This regulates our dream time and anger and vigor and all these different things. So the lungs, process something called the po, which is the animal spirit, or what that really kind of translates to is our animalistic tendencies and our animal-like instincts. This is really important to understand because collectively in modern culture, we sort of lose relationship with this, and we have lost connection to it. So a lot of us don't hunt our food anymore. We're not outdoors bearing and combating the elements anymore. And part of that is what keeps our lungs strong. It's that relationship to the animalistic tendencies that we do have. Because we are mammals, we are part of the animal kingdom. We've, for the most part, just sort of forgotten that. So that's another big one. After that, is about boundaries. So our lungs have a very close relationship to something called Wei Qi. It's an idea that's not found in Western medicine, but between the layer of the skin and the muscle, there's this membrane called Wei Qi. It's a defensive energy. It's sort of our frontline defense system that keeps things from coming in. So that's pathogens that come on the skin, and the herbs and the breathing techniques that can push those things out. That's part of what our Wei Qi does. But in addition to that too, foreign emotional patterns, things that do not serve us, how well we take in and keep the exterior world outside, and the things that we don't want to let in. That's all has to do with lung function, that membrane between the outside world and our internal terrain. So keeping these things in mind, all right? The other thing is movement of the lungs. So I'm going to go through these points and then talk about what this means in real time. So moving the lungs, the thing I want you guys to think about is that the lungs are active right now. The lungs are technically strong right now. So throughout the year, the energy in the body will gather and coalesce into different organ systems at different times of year. Now, if you're like, why does that happen? And the simple answer is because Chinese medicine is a holographic system. And what that means is what's happening at the small or the micro is also being reflected in the macro. As above, so below, as the old adage says. This is very true in Chinese medicine. So what we see in the body, whatever's happening here is definitely going to be reflected on the outside. So in the natural world, what do we see during the fall season? The leaves turn to a fiery color and begin to fall. And this is the beginning process of when the yin cycle of the year begins, when nature starts to contract. And so what we're seeing is when the leaves fall off of trees, the energy is leaving the extremities and it's starting to root down and starting to coalesce into the root system. This is also why we eat root vegetables during the wintertime. So as we see this in the natural world, the Chinese were hip to this and said, well, if that's happening, there's got to be sort of an inward process with us as well. And where it's happening right now, what they noticed over thousands of years, is that the energy is starting to move into the lungs. So what that means, okay, the movement of the lungs, how well we breathe, and how well we're going to process our emotions are going to be pretty pivotal at this time of year. So what this means: grief, sadness, sorrow. If we have had a rough year, or say we have not touched those emotions consistently throughout the year, we haven't been proactive in our emotional terrain, what that means is that at this time of year, as the lungs get strong, the lungs say, hey, we're here to work, but there's a lot of garbage in here. So there's sort of a cleansing process that comes when we get to this time of year. Our emotional terrain needs to be purged, it needs to be moved. And so the advice I can give you is don't run from grief, sadness, and sorrow. You might have lots of reasons to be sad in your life, maybe about family connection, maybe it was just a rough year, maybe you've had some loss, maybe someone passed, but whatever it is, don't run from the emotion. If you run from those emotions, sadness, grief, and sorrow, right now, you are more apt to have a rougher year and to get sicker later in the year. So part of the thing we have to understand is that we have to digest our experiences in reality and align with the season. Don't run from the grief and sadness now. What I've seen over the years in Chinese medicine, okay, what I've come across is that people that have rough family dynamics, that don't have the greatest connection with their dad or their mom, or their, the relationships are strained with their cousins, these kinds of things. When you have that, and then on top of what the lungs are naturally doing, which is kind of cleansing out grief, sorrow, and sadness now anyway, then this is where people say that seasons are difficult. They have a tough time. So for myself personally, collectively, for the most part, I have fantastic family dynamics, and I love the fall. I love the introspective times of year, but I also have a very strong family life. So that grief and sadness is not weighing on me as I encroach into this season. So keep this in mind, okay? Process your emotions, especially these specific emotions. Stay with them. Now the next piece is breathing. The lungs are active right now, which means we need to move them. The more interplay your diaphragm has, okay? When we inhale, the diaphragm, which is below the pecs, when we inhale, the diaphragm pushes down so the lungs can fill up above. And then as we exhale, the diaphragm pushes up and expels all of the oxygen out of the lungs. And the more dexterity, the more pliable the diaphragm is, the better. So what this looks like in real time is soft, relaxed, prolonged cardio. So doing 30 to 45 minutes on the elliptical machine, or going for a brisk walk, and doing it that way where the lungs are moving but not being strained. This is not the time of year to push your lungs heavily. So if you're looking to do P90X or some kind of extreme workout right now, especially as you get into winter, don't do it. Softer, more relaxed exercise, Qigong, soft, relaxed abdominal breathing, things that move the lungs but do not strain the lungs, okay? Wind sprints at this time of year is not your friend. So that's one. Going back and kind of reviewing the pieces that I started with, all right? Another thing we want to look at is, because the lungs are active and they're strong right now, but also processing a lot, we want to use plant oils that are supportive to the lungs. And those are the aromatic ones. So we're looking at eucalyptus, peppermint, and specifically grapefruit is amazing. It's very cleansing for the lungs. So if you don't have essential oil diffuser, I suggest you get one. They're 30 bucks on Amazon. You can buy essential oils at pretty much any grocery store. In my area, Nugget sells them, as do Bel Air. So they're pretty easy to get a hold of, but those three are fantastic to have in your repertoire at this time of year. Keeps the lungs clean, supports what they naturally need to be doing, and it's going to keep you from getting sick later in the season. Now, going back to this idea about the boundaries, okay, the territory. One of the ideas in Chinese medicine, like I said, the animal instincts are processed by the lungs. The liver processes our dream time, okay, and how well we vision forward into life. So the thing we need to kind of think about in this, okay, is that when we look at the lungs and we look at lung function, and we've got this this idea with the animal spirits is what they call. So in Chinese medicine, each of the organ systems have an animal counterpart, and that animal is not just to be like a cool, awesome thing and just like let's just attach an arbitrary animal. The animals are associated to these elemental rhythms and to the organ systems to paint a picture. A mythological picture, if you will. It's a way to tell a story in a very elegant, abstract, and artistic way to sort of clue you into the larger rhythms of the lung function. So, the liver, the animal for that is the green dragon, which I can always talk about another time, but in the context of this video, the white tiger, okay? All the kung fu nerds are like, yeah, white tiger. It's not that. But the white tiger, okay, what it points to is when we see tigers and we see how they operate, tigers are a formidable creature. They are menacing and intimidating by nature, by default. So if we can kind of keep this idea in mind, this is sort of the behavior that we want to model to some degree. People that posture well, that can be menacing and be imposing without saying much, typically have very natural and healthy lung function. So the thing we want to think about with this is that this time of year, the claiming of boundaries, being able to be territorial and to claim space is one of the things that we need to have on the front line because it's part of the spectrum of lung energetics. Really important to consider. So whether you're establishing boundaries with family, friends, loved ones, it doesn't really matter, but whatever it is, you're going to want those boundaries to be strong, something that's to be cultivated now. Of course, at any time of year, we should be cultivating this skill. It's very good, but moreover, it's really active right now. So this is something to consider when we think about, oh, we got a nice little spider here. Cool. The thing we want to think about with this is that during the holiday season, as we move into fall, we move into winter, people are more needy. Okay, they need more because they're going through more stuff typically. And with that, sometimes is like, nah, dog, I'm good. I'm in my own shit and I need to put up a wall and say no. And that's really active right now. So it's one of the things that I just encourage you to be attentive to and to be mindful of. So keep these things in mind, okay? Get those essential oils, breathe, be soft on the lungs, pay attention to your animal instincts, move, breathe, be active, but do not stress and strain. Use those plant oils and understand that territorial space, being able to posture well, keeping the chest upright and keeping the lungs open and active is one of the best things you can do at this time of year. And do not run from your emotions. As you feel the heavy emotions, sit with them. Take the time to cry. I'm telling you now, and it's hard for a lot of guys to do. But if you can find the time alone, to go do that, you're going to be better off. Your immune response is better, and your body will thank you, as will your mind and spirit, as you go throughout the year. Thanks a bunch.